At this time, we have a real treat. We're going to have a musical offering by Ellie Mizushima that's going to tie in with my Dharma talk for today. She's going to sing a song from Mulan, a song titled Reflections. So, Ellie Mizushima. Thank you so much, Ellie. It's wonderful. 2 weeks ago, Koichi and Ellie were both at the sort of featured speakers and entertainers at our Southern District Junior IBA seminar that Orange County Buddhist Church hosted, in which young people from all the Southern District temples came for an all-day seminar. We chose the theme of Buddhism and music, and so I thought, oh, I have to get Koichi and Ellie to come. And so they both did a duet at the opening service, and then Koichi gave a wonderful Dharma talk to the young people, and then later Ellie sang that song. Let's see, did you sing that on Sunday or Gino? On Sunday? No. At the Sunday, yeah, Sunday, right. So they both sang at the Saturday seminar, and then on Sunday, for our Sunday service, she sang that song Reflection as a musical offering. And it really struck me as such a Buddhistic song, and even more so when I just heard it, especially the title. See, that reflection has two meanings, right? Has two meanings. Reflection can mean our reflection of ourself in a mirror, but Buddhism is a life of self-reflection. Self-reflection. So reflection also means, am I really looking inside myself, beyond the reflection. So I'd like to reflect today about this song, Reflections, and how we relate to it in terms of Buddhism. So to me, my favorite line of this song is, "When will my reflection show who I am inside?" When will my reflection show who I am inside? We could say that Buddhism, if you put it into a few words, it's the path of finding our true self. Finding our true self. We live a life of ignorance and delusion, the unenlightened life, but to find true awakening means to find your truest self, your truest, deepest self. And maybe this song is an expression of that. So Buddhism starts with this very basic, fundamental question, challenging us, who are you? Who am I? I'll never forget a wonderful minister that I have had great respect for over the years in our Southern California area, Reverend Masao Kodani of the Senshin Temple, once in a Dharma talk, he shared what he experienced when he studied Buddhism in Japan at Ryukoku University. And he was in a Buddhist philosophy course. And at this first day of class, the professor, Reverend Kodani was sitting in the front row, and he pointed him out and he said, by the way, who are you? Oh, I'm Masao Kodani. Oh, well, that's your name. But who are you? I'm a foreign student studying from America. Well, that's what you're doing here in Japan. But who are you? I'm a third generation Japanese American. Oh, well, that's your ethnicity. But who are you? I am the second son of my parents, Kodani. Well, that's your family connection, but who are you? On and on and on this went. This professor just kept challenging him. No matter what he said, he was not answering the question of, who are you? Really, the professor was trying to introduce Buddhist philosophy and have him come to realize that who we think we are is nothing more than, well, my family relationship, my occupation, my age, my ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. I love golf, or I like to watch the Food Network, our hobbies, our interests, but we cannot answer the fundamental question of who am I? And that is the fundamental question that all great Buddhists have reflected on and have come to discover their deepest, truest self. That's what Shakyamuni Buddha came to discover. Great Zen Master Dogen, great, tremendous, amazing Zen master in the 1200s in Japan, same period of time as Shinran Shoni. He has famous words. Dogen says, to study Buddhism is to study the self. He doesn't say to study Buddhism as you have to study this Prajnaparamita Sutra. You have to study it very deeply. No. Dogen says to study Buddhism is to study the self. Then the next line of his famous statement is, to study the self is to forget the self. Forget the self is translation, but it means you go beyond the self. You go beyond the ego self. You awaken to your true self. So, to study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. Then the next line. What happens after that? After you forget the self, then you awaken to the myriad of things. Meaning, you become one with the entire world. Everything. There's nothing that separates you and others, you and the cat or the dog or the tree or the flower or the earth. You become one, truly one with everything. So that's Dogen's realization of his true self. To study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to all things. I used to think that this was the core Buddhist teaching, and so when I received my ordination in Japan as a minister, you receive a Buddhist name. So I chose for myself the Buddhist name Kenji, and it has Chinese characters. Ken means to see, Ji means oneself. So I chose for myself the Buddhist name Kenji, or to see oneself, because I felt this was such a fundamental core teaching of Buddhism. But if I am really honest about things, I think instead of living a life of Kenji, seeing oneself, I live a life of kenta, which means seeing others. It's easy to see others. It's very hard to see ourselves. We can easily criticize others or see others, or even physically see other people. Hey, you got crumbs hanging on your mouth. But we can't see it. Something right under our nose. I think I've shared this story before, but I had this experience in Orange County some years ago. After the service, I'm out in front of the Hondo talking to people in a kind of a courtyard area, and one of our members put his arm around me and said, "Sensei, I need to talk to you." And he pulled me way off to the side of the Hondo, side of the sanctuary. I thought, wow, he must need some personal counseling or something serious. Maybe he lost a loved one in his life. He wants to talk private. So I went to the side. And then when no one could see or hear, he said to me, "Sensei, your zipper is down." Oh my gosh. I'm in front of us talking to all these people. My zipper is wide open. So close. Can't even see my zipper is down. How much more so the inner self is so hard to see. And that's why we need the teachings. That's why we need Buddhism, to help us see our inner self, to help us awaken to our true self. Shinran Shonin, the founder of Shin Buddhism, he saw deeply into himself. I don't know if there's many religious thinkers that were so honest, so what? How do we say the word? It's almost like brutally honest about his inner self. You know, he doesn't say, well, you know, I'm not perfect, but I'm not too bad of a guy. He doesn't say something like that. He says, my inner mind is like snakes and scorpions, meaning, you know, sneaky. But of course, he puts up a nice front to everyone, and that's what he says. Gee, I find myself, I put up this nice front to everyone, look like a distinguished monk, but inside my mind is like snakes and scorpions, meaning very sneaky. He has one of his writings, he talks about nothing but his inner self and his outer self, the inner and outer. And he says, on the outside I look wise and compassionate. On the inside, you know, I'm very foolish. But he says, my teacher Honen, on the outside he looks kind of foolish, but on the inside he's really wise. The exact opposite. So Shinran Shonin, when you look at his writings, you have to look at it from the standpoint of someone who has seen deeply into himself, who has reflected deeply into himself in light of the teachings. And that's what, to me, Shin Buddhism is, a life of reflecting and coming to awaken to our deepest, truest self. This song, going back to the lyrics, when will my reflection show who I am inside, shows that maybe this person is struggling with what's on the outside and what's on the inside. And there's a famous poet by the name of Basho, who has a famous poem that many of you know. It goes, showing front, showing back, maple leaves fall. It's in the fall time, and Basho is looking at the autumn leaves falling from a tree, and the maple leaves showing front, showing back, maple leaves fall. But that was a metaphor for himself. Instead of being a person who I only show the front, I only show my good front to the world, he realized I should be a whole person, showing front, showing back, living my true life, my sincere life, without any hypocrisies. So I think Basho in his poem reflects that as well. So Buddhism is this life of seeing our reflection, seeing ourself, but reflecting and seeing deeper to discover our truest, deepest inner self. And that truest, deepest inner self, at the core of it, is this wish to live our true life. It's our wish to live a truly awakened life and to have all beings awaken to that true life as well. Namam notes, namam notes, namam notes, namam notes, namam notes, namam notes.